What's up, everybody? We are going to do an honest review of the 2022 Lowrider ST. This should be the same thing for the 23s. The only big difference between the 22 and the 23s is going to be 23s had the option for traction control where it wasn't available on 22s. Either way, this is going to be an honest review from a rider standpoint on that bike. That being my actual bike that I've put roughly 21,000 miles on. This isn't sponsored by anybody. This is just an honest review. So if you came for an honest review on that bike, this is your video. Take a look at it. Let us know what you think. Let's get into it. I did some lists on the info that I kind of want to go over this bike, so let's go for it. One of the biggest questions that I've been asked since I've had this bike, and I've seen in a lot of other videos of people just discussing this bike, is the Lowrider ST a good touring bike? What I mean by touring is you're not bar hopping, you're not out just banging the country roads. You're actually going to get on it and put 1,000 miles on it in a weekend, or 1,000 miles on a day with an iron butt challenge, or what have you. Can you get on this bike and just go for a long distance and not have to worry about it? The short answer is yes. That bike right there, I've had several weekends where I've put well over 1,000 miles on it in a weekend. There has been one instance where I did a 780-ish mile day in just one day. I did just fine, just like any other bike, because my buddy that was riding with me, he was on a road glide, and we were both sore at the end of the day. I did it just fine on that bike. But it's all going to come down to the rider. I am not a super tall person. I'm not a super short person. I'm 5 foot 8 inches with just an average inseam. So this bike comes factory with mid controls. It's a comfortable riding position for me. If you are 6 foot 13 and you've got really long legs, then this might not be the most comfortable bike for you out of the box because of the mid controls. So it's all rider depending. If you're just an average size individual, it's going to be plenty comfortable for you to go out and put some miles on it and not have to worry about it. It does have bags. My bags are off the bike right now, but it does come with some hard bags. Those are decent. They're kind of small, but you can still pack into them if you need to get away for a weekend. If not, then there's companies like Thrash and Supply where they have a duffel bag where you can just set it on either a rack on the very back of the bike or right behind you on the rear seat and have some extra storage. But all in all, yes, you can go out and tour this bike just perfectly fine. The next biggest question that I've been asked just in general with this bike is how is the fairing? Because if you are coming from a bike where either A, you don't have a fairing, or B, you're coming from a full-size bagger with the big fairing on it, or you've just ran like one of those Memphis Shade style fairings, how does this one react in comparison to all of them? I'll tell you that factory for this bike, the fairings is an excellent fairing. It gives you a lot of wind protection. It really helps out with that body as you're pushing down the interstate and you're not getting thrown around quite as much. One plus to the fairing is it is a frame mounted fairing. So whenever you do get that tractor trailer push as you're coming around it, you don't feel it in your handlebars. That bike actually absorbs the majority of that wind push for you. I will say that the factory windscreen is not the best. Just the way that it's positioned, I was getting personally at 5 foot 8, I was getting quite a bit of wind buffering as I was riding. So as you're going down, just kind of bouncing around a little bit, still catching quite a bit of wind in your face. I went with I believe that's the 6-inch Clockworks. What's good about that is it's actually got that kind of swoop right at the top of it, and that just pushes the air up. I didn't want a big tall windscreen on it. I like that kind of look of keeping it more of a performance look. So I went with the 6-inch, but just with that little swoop at the end, it made a world of difference. That's the windscreen that the day that I did 750 miles, I had that one on there. At the end of the day, my neck wasn't killing me like it used to whenever I was just raw dogging the world on a dyno with nothing on the front, doing long weekends. That definitely made a big difference. The bike that I owned before this was a Road Glide, and I will tell you that it acts very similar to a Road Glide as far as that windscreen in the front and the whole fairing, everything. It is a smaller portion, so you don't get as much of a wind protection as you would on a road glide, but it still acts very similar. And like I said, I've put some miles down on this bike with no issues, and that fairing with the windscreen is it's spot on of where it needs to be, especially if you're going to go out putting down some miles. One other thing that I've been asked before, just in general, is how is it with two-up riding? This bike, it can two up just fine, and I've twoed up. I've rode with my wife plenty of times. I have daughters that ride. They rode with me plenty of times. It is, and then the rear suspension, it does have a preload adjustment, so you can actually go in and adjust preloads, so that way you can set that rear suspension up for the two-up riding. I will say though, if you're coming from a bagger, think of it like this. You came from a full-size SUV to a mid-size SUV. This is a mid-size SUV compared to a full-size bagger. So whenever you are two-up riding, you are going to be kind of in each other's comfort zones a little bit more. But, you know, if you're like me and you love your wife, you don't really mind being that much closer to her. But that is kind of the biggest thing, and I don't mind being that close to her. So, you know, it just really all depends on you personally. If you don't mind being a little bit closer to that back passenger, then you're fine. If you're taking a very long trip and you want that little extra space, this probably wouldn't be the bike. So if you're doing a ton of two-up riding and that's all you ever do is two-up, and your average size individuals, then you might feel a little cramped over time on this. I won't say it can't be done, because it can, and I have done it. I'm just saying is you will get a little bit more of a cramped feeling coming from this bike than it would be if you're on a full-size bagger. Next thing let's talk about is performance. A lot of people want to know the performance, because this is kind of a performance bike. I say it in quotations is because you get people, well, that's not a sport bike, I get it. But from the Harley world, this is a pretty performance-driven motorcycle. It's got the inverted front forks with dual disc brakes. All in all, the performance, it's there. Out of the box, this thing's pretty impressive out of the box. Bone stock, you can get up and run. You can bang corners with it without feeling that suspension fade like you did on a lot of the older bikes. Since this is a soft tail, and just like the original soft tails, the engine is hard mounted to the frame. And the reason that's big is if you've ever rode a Dyna or bagger and you roll into that corner and you start getting that little hip sway, the wobble, this doesn't get that. With it all being hard mounted, whenever you lay into that corner and go around it, especially at high rates of speed, you're not going to get that wobble. The only downside to that is at highway speeds, you do get a little bit more vibration up in your handlebars. That's just, it is what it is. You take the good with the bad and move forward. But as far as the overall performance, straight out of the box, this thing can get it. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not nice to any of my stuff. I beat my bikes. I buy them to ride them. I don't buy them to look at them. So coming from a road glide to this, whenever I first got on this bike, on the test ride, I just told my wife, hey, I want to go test ride one just to see, and I ended up buying it that day just because I was that impressed with the performance out of the box. So if you're wanting a performance-based touring style bike, you know, the Lowrider ST would be right up your alley. I will say though that EPA regulations and all that fun stuff, out of the box, the bike's quick, but the stock exhaust is a real drag. It tears the bottom end out of the bike, bottom end performance, not mechanically, but that bottom end where you're really laying into it, it's lackluster at best. I put a 2-to-1 stainless steel exhaust in it, and whenever I did that, it completely changed the dynamic of how that bike rode. Now whenever I go from a stop into a dig and just the bike just wants to eat, it opened that up a ton. So if you do get the bike and you do want that that little bit more of performance, but you don't really want to go into needing cams and all that stuff, this bike, it don't need it. It just out of the box with the 117 on that smaller frame, the bike just gets it, and doing an exhaust will completely change that dynamic for the better. an exhaust and a tune, and you would be surprised at what this bike would do. Next thing let's talk about is the braking. If you've read any reviews or talked to anybody that's ever rode one of these, that is probably one of the biggest downfalls of this bike. Front brakes are good. It's got dual disc brakes up front, floating rotors. I'm pretty sure they're Brembo calipers. Spot on. You lay on the front brakes, it grabs hard and it stops. The rear brakes are lackluster at best. The rear brakes are total garbage. If you ever ride hard and you learn how to start trail braking, it is very difficult to trail brake on this bike because of how those rear brakes are. You lay into the rear brakes, it doesn't set your suspension up like it needs to. There's times where sometimes you don't even want to touch your front brake and you're just rolling up to a stoplight. You have to put a ton of pressure into the rear brake pedal just to kind of get the bike to start stopping. So if you're wanting a bike with the best brakes ever, this is not going to be the bike for you. One thing that there was an issue, or a common issue that a lot of people had with the brakes on this, besides just being garbage as far as stopping, especially with the rear brakes, the front brake rotors are known for warping. It was very prevalent in the 22s. I'm not really sure on the 23s and newer if they're still having the warping issues. I got a buddy that I ride with. He's got a 23. He didn't have warping issues on his, but I'm not saying it's fixed because it wasn't for every bike. But the front rotors do warp. Mine warped at almost 5,000 miles. Granted, I ride pretty hard. I don't treat the bike nice. I bought it to have fun. I bought it to ride hard, and so I ride it hard, and the front rotors, they warped. Almost was vibrating you off the bike whenever I finally replaced them. So just be forewarned on that. Is if you buy a 22, and let's say it's got low miles or whatever, and you do go to start putting some miles on it, just be forewarned, the front rotors will probably warp. There are some upgrades that you can do for the bike to help out with the rear braking. The biggest one is changing the brake pedal position. Easiest way to do it is, imagine this is your peg. Your brake pedal is actually almost level or just below, so you don't have any stopping power, so you can pick up that pedal. Whenever you pick the pedal up, it does allow you to put more downward force on the brake. That does help out a little bit, but it's still, the rear brake is trash on this bike. One of my next major upgrades for this is I plan on putting a better caliper in the rear, and then if that doesn't help, looking at maybe doing a different master cylinder. Biggest thing is I do want to retain ABS on this bike because I do a lot of riding. I do get caught in the rain, so ABS is nice in the rain. So I don't want to wipe out my ABS, but I need to figure out something with this bike just to help out with the rear brakes. Let's go into rider ergonomics. The bike from factory, it wants to put you in kind of a low hung or hunched position to put your body kind of over the gas tank, so you're more leaning forwards. That's fine whenever you're just doing short rides around town, hitting the back roads or whatever. On longer rides, before I did risers on mine, I did have some lower back issues just from putting extended miles and you're just bent over. Not super comfortable from factory, but I mean, if you buy a Harley, that's one of the first things that everybody does is put bars on it, bars, risers. But I mean, that's one of the first things that everybody always puts on, right? Bars and risers. I will tell you on this one, it changes everything about the bike once you put bars and risers on. Like I said, I'm 5'8". I put 8-inch risers from my machinist and some high bend bars from Thrash and Supply, and it put me at like a perfect position. I've got a bad shoulder, and it put me to where I'm not up or down. It's a really good feel for me personally. So changing the bars and risers will help out with that. All right, let's go into a couple of other small things. This bike does not come with a radio. Even though it does have the fairing and all that stuff, it doesn't come with a radio. Harley does offer from Rockford Fosgate a radio system to go into that. You pull out part of the fairing, and then you put the audio unit into the fairing, and then it's controlled all via your phone with Bluetooth. There is an app for it to help out with setting up your different audio controls, but you just play however you normally play your music. If you have a headset, it's going to act the same. For the money, I have it in there. I like that one more so than some of the other brands, because the other brands, they just kind of bolt to the risers. I don't like that look. I like mine to where whenever you look forwards, you can see the speaker grills, but that's really about it. So I did it because of that. After, it was probably about 8 months. I had the bike for like 8 months. Got caught in some pretty bad rainstorms, and now the radio at higher volumes cuts out. And the stock speakers and everything in that, typically at about 70 to 80, the sound would get washed out. Like, I could hear that I had music, couldn't really make out the words. Now I can't really put the radio above 80%. If I do, and let's say a higher bass or treble hits, it actually cuts the radio out and then reboots the system. I had Harley look at it. They were like, well, we can't really do nothing. And I was like, yeah, it's still under warranty. So they put an amp in it and then told me if the amp doesn't fix it, I'm pretty much SOL. So that's what happened. They put an amp in it. And after the amp was put in, still about 80% volume, it cuts out. And their solution at the dealer was just don't turn it up so loud. I didn't really quite agree with that, especially like how I said just a second ago, where I get washout of the sound at 70 to 80, which is just, you know, highway cruising speeds. I plan on putting some new speakers in there. That hasn't been the top of my priority list, because I around town I'll listen to it some, but for the most part I just listen through my comms in my helmet. So eventually I'll put some better speakers in. I hope that will help out with the cutout. I did some of my own diagnostics after they put the amp in. I'm not getting any power voltage drops or anything like that, so it should just be the speakers. But there are speaker options available. The factory one from Harley, in my opinion, it looks the best, and that's which one I recommend. There are some other brands. I know nothing about them besides just how they look, and I didn't care for it, so I can't give you any information on that. Let's go into tires. Factory tires, in my opinion, were excellent tires. I love them. They're the Michelin Scorchers, I think. Michelin Scorcher. I'll correct it in the edits if that's not the correct name for it. Those tires are excellent in cornering. They were excellent in just day-to-day riding. They were excellent in rain dissipation or water dissipation if you get caught in the rain. I had zero issues, zero, with those tires, except for if you plan on keeping the factory tires, just plan on the rear tire, replacing it every 5,000 miles. My first tire, I put on it probably about 5,500 miles, and it had 330 seconds of tread left on it. That was with no burnouts, nothing like that. It was just normal riding. The tire eats away. I wanted to keep the same tire because I liked how it rode, so I bought another one, put it on the bike, and same thing at about 5,000 miles, just the tire was needing to be replaced again. I'm at 21,000 now. I did put on a Bridgestone rear tire. That one was really good, and that one lasted me about 12,000 miles. The only reason I replaced that is I put a new front tire on it, and just the way I am is I try and, you know, keep stuff together. So after I needed a new front tire, I just matched the back, so that way it was a matching set. And I'm running Bridgestones on it again. I like the way they ride. I like the way they feel. They're good on the interstate. They're good for mileage. They're good for the corners. The one I have on there right now is good for wet riding as well. I live in North Carolina. I get caught in rainstorms all the time, and the group that I ride with, we are constantly riding. It don't matter if it's rain, sleet, snow, cold, hot, whatever, we're out riding. So I needed a tire that could keep up with that. So as a conclusion for this review, I'm going to give the bike a solid probably 8 out of 10. I really like the bike. I like how it handles. I like the performance of it. I like riding it. I've put in under 2 years. I think I've had it for maybe like 18, no. I've had it for almost 2 years. I think 2 months from now it'll be 2 years, and I put 21,000 miles on it, and smiles the entire time whenever I'm riding it. I love it. The biggest cons is the audio situation. If you want a bike with a good radio, probably not the best bet. And then if you want a bike that has good brakes, probably not the best. I've got an 03 Dyna, and I feel like with stock brakes, my 03 Dyna stops better than this. And my 03 Dyna has a single front disc, single piston front end, same with the rear, and this one's got dual pistons, dual front brakes, and a dual in the rear or whatever, and it's just, the brakes are garbage on it. So that's why I'm kind of taken away, and it's not a 10 out of 10 bike. There are some upgrades that I would suggest doing to the bike. I won't really get into that in this video, but it was more of a review from a rider standpoint. Is this a good bike? I feel like after 21,000 miles, I had the enough knowledge on the bike to give you an honest review. So if you guys are thinking about getting a Lowrider ST and you're trying to figure out, can I put some miles on it? Absolutely. If you're looking at a Lowrider ST and you're like, can I hit the canyons or the back roads, the curvy stuff, and not have to worry? Absolutely. Out of the box, the suspension rocks on this thing. There are upgrades to it that you can do that I will be doing soon to this bike. But out of the box, it's not really needed. It's excellent. All around, it's an excellent bike. To be honest with you, I don't really plan on getting rid of the bike. I really like it. I really want to keep it. I might add another bike to the inventory later, but for the most part, this is going to be my daily bike. So if you guys are planning on getting one, I would strongly suggest it. Thank you guys. My name is Brandon with Hog City Cycle Works out of Lexington, North Carolina. Thank you for watching the video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. If you have any questions, put it in the comments down below, and I'll see if I can answer them for you. Just let me know what you guys think. Have a good one.